Some of you, in terms of Rob's talk, and I want to just talk about our agenda here for a moment. Rob talked about really two very important things, particularly the adoption for this community of global standards, as well as also the right brain, left brain sort of education. If you look at our agenda for tomorrow, what Mike and Richard and Don and Jenny and Allison are going to fundamentally talk about is really how do we bring those things to life. So if you're wondering what exactly are these global standards he's referring to, we're going to have a full hour, actually 2 hours on that, an hour on standards in general, and then pretty much about an hour on social media standards. But at this point, it's a pleasure to have 4 members of the press grill my boss. I'm really looking forward to this because normally he grills me as part of my job, and now I'm going to really enjoy what you guys are going to do. So why don't we just go across the board, and Arun, since you asked the first cynical question, why don't you ask the next one?
Hello? Okay, great. Thank you for that kind introduction, and indeed for revealing my question. I'm sure you're not a plant now that I know you're a journalist, so that's all good. Rob, you mentioned Clorox, which was actually going to be my question, so it appears you've scooped me, but I will find another one to ask. This might sound a little strange coming at an industry forum like AMEC, which is, of course, an industry forum devoted to measurement. But what has always struck me about the PR industry's attempts to build a more cohesive measurement approach is that so much of it has been agency-specific. I can think of so many agencies over the last 10, 20 years that have come out with their own bespoke measurement systems, each slightly different from each other. And I think we all know in this room that any kind of initiative has to be industry-wide. In your talk, you talked about how you want to get together with the heads of the other big agencies, but you're all competitive people. So how do you actually see this happening in practice, where the big agencies do come together with a cohesive, shared approach to measurement, rather than just coming up with their own systems that give their own clients a specific benefit?
Great question, and because of the question, it prompts me to think of a way to approach that. I hadn't thought of it. Here's what I'd say about that. I'm proud to have had the research function reporting into me at Ketchum for 24 years. Been deeply involved in the category, and some of you may remember a guy named Walt Lindemann, who was well known in our industry, and he created in 1989 the Ketchum Publicity Tracking Model, which was an algorithm that allowed you to do weighted measures of quality of coverage and the type of publication it was in, the amount of people in your target that it reached. So it was a good qualitative, quantitative, balanced scorecard. That was a differentiator back then. Actually, we did tons of speeches about it. We won awards around it. What I would say to Andy and Dave and Richard and Don is, at the other big 5 firms, I would say that is not the differentiator anymore. It's time for us to make standards in the measurement of social and traditional media a commoditized standard in our industry. There's plenty of room for differentiation in all that other stuff. Look at a company called Unified Social that's about to go global. If you haven't, you should. That's differentiating, and we're working with them. So it's all that stuff around here that's differentiating. Now is the time for us to give up on thinking that the fundamental measurement of earned conversation is a differentiator. That's what I'd say. But
Thank you.
Good
Thank
question.
You.
Hi, Rob.
Hi.
Ben Smith, PR Moment. I don't know, I see lots of, frankly, robust measurement models at this conference and our own analytics conferences. More, I think, this year than I've seen in previous years. But in the end, I don't want to insult everybody, but within this room is essentially a bunch of measurement geeks.
Yeah.
Within the wider PR community, do you think that PR, frankly, has a measurement paranoia, almost a confidence problem when it comes to measurement?
I think we're making progress. All this conversation. That's why I refer to this as the greatest army ever assembled to go after the rest of the industry. And it is preaching to the choir. Most of the people in this room have the religion. But I think there is a growth. Look, the very people who might have shied away from that, some of the real creative brand marketing types coming up with the really cool campaigns, are now the ones right up against the CMO. And there isn't a CMO on the planet worth anything who isn't deeply invested in data and analytics right now, right? I admire IBM. IBM had this conference now that they moved around the world starting about a year and a half ago. And it was, I think they were proclaiming kind of the first ever global summit bringing together pairs of CIOs and CMOs. 150 companies, and you had to bring both. Your CIO and your CMO would attend for 3 days together. They invited me and Amor Hines, because she's the CEO of Tex 100, we got to go. And it was awesome. It was all about the application of big data to marketing. So as I say, within the PR firm, some of the corporate people were a little more interested in analytics, the issues management folks, public affairs folks. Some of the brand marketers might be more into the big creative idea, but they're the ones now completely immersed in the world of the big data CMO. So I think it's going to happen. But I kind of see your point. And one is Bill Murray here from PRSA? Hey, Bill. Bill knows that I've shared this with him. A couple of years ago, I was at the PRSA convention. They have the vendor room, right, where there are these 10-foot booths of the media measurement companies. And I walked that, and for years I'd kind of walked that, and you'd get a mouse pad and a pen, and it was feeling a little bit old. And I walked it 2 years ago, and it was unbelievable. It was venture capital funded, hot shit startup companies that I had never heard of. And I said to one of them, I said, are you making a keynote speech here? After talking to him for about 20 minutes about the awesome new world he was opening up. And he said, no, he said, I speak at South by Southwest all the time, but they don't let me get up on the stage here. I'm a vendor. So it's kind of like tucked in the separate room. And now I know Bill and others have brought those folks up onto the stage. It's time for this stuff to be center stage.
Hi there, I'm Selina from Gulkana. I get lots of case studies from lots of agencies that come across my desk. And I would say, I was talking to the guys earlier, and I would say probably 70% of them are still very AVE heavy when they're talking about what they've actually achieved, etc. Now, I know you talked about global standards by the end of the year, and it's just the beginning. But realistically, can you see a day when there is no AVE?
Well, I will say I judged 2 out of the 3 big North American award gigs this year, and we had catching people in all of them around the world. And the only ones that are winning and getting to the ends are the ones that have better measurement. So someone ought to get a clue. I agree, by the way. I sat at if you're from Ketchum and you have a lot of kind of big brand marketing kind of campaigns, you can never judge at a table where your agency might be a contestant. So I was in things like government event 1 or fewer days, kind of smaller categories. And still, 32 binders, and the only 2 that made it through the gauntlet were ones that had decent measurements. So it's still a problem, and I think it does. Bigger brands and bigger agencies tend to do it better. So we've got a ways to go.
But do you want to put a point in the sand, do you think? Because I've asked David this question previously, and David's sort of talking about 10 to 15 years before we've stopped talking about AVE. Would you say it will be the same? Do you think it will take that long?
No, I don't at all.
No.
I don't at all. I think not only will AVE die a lot faster than that, but I think, frankly, a lot of other forms of measurement are going to supersede everything we're talking about today.
Thank you.
Hi. Ruth Wyatt from PR Week. One thing intrigues me about measurement is that the PR profession covers such a broad church. There are so many different disciplines, so many different sectors within it. How do you balance the need to create a globally recognized industry standard measurement metric with something that can adapt to the nuances and idiosyncrasies of all the disciplines that sit under that banner?
Yeah, ours is a ridiculously diverse industry, you're right. I remember Bill Nielsen, who was one of the gods of our industry for years, the leader of communications at J&J, great guy, and he's anti-measurement. And he was head of the Page Society, whatever, over the years. And his point of view, I don't want to overstate it, but was that the things of greatest value that PR does are never going to be measurable. For example, all the things that never get covered. How do you measure that? Judgment calls about company policy. So I happen to think that the daily give and take of most of what we do, in-house and agency, is not that grand that it can't be measured. So I respectfully disagree with that point of view. But you know what? I would say this. Take a look at, I assume it's on several association sites, but on the IPR site, and I assume it's on the Amex site, the standards, right, the agreed upon standards, they cut across all these things. There are standards for relationships, relationship strength, for reputation, not just outputs but outcomes, for purchase intent, for engagement. A lot of these more existential outcomes, not just the more tangible cause and effect sales related ones. So unlike a lot of things in our business that we have a hard time somehow reconciling a corporate reputation initiative, an influencer management relationship building initiative with a hard selling kind of sell some packages kind of initiative. I think the standard setters have done a fantastic job of covering all those bases. Great question.
Thank you. Inefficient PR spend is bad for a client.
I'm sorry.
Inefficient PR
Yes,
spend is
yeah,
bad
for
for
sure.
a client. But it strikes me that there might be situations, certainly in the short term, when it's good for an agency. So how do you, what's the incentive for you to improve that situation?
Good. I'll share an anecdote that sadly kind of supports that. A big client 10 years ago, we pushed for two things that were unbelievably self-evident at the beginning of the relationship: annual strategic programming and measurement. The answer to both was no, because if you present an annual plan as opposed to just doing project work throughout the year, you can be accepted or rejected. We're happy where our budget is. We don't want a yes or no vote. Measurement, we're happy where the kind of impressions-oriented measurement is. If we dig in deeper and aim for something that is more outcomes and pre-post, we might not show as well. So we're not going to do that. And yeah, good for the agency in the sense that we continue to have the retainer. But we want to do work that matters. And guess what? All the CMOs and all the smart CCOs are starting to really dig in on show me my ROI and show me why it matters. So certainly at the level of play that we get to play in, it's not going to fly. So we push for it.
Thank you.
Yeah, second question for me is pretty simple. Do you see any evidence that PR is more difficult to measure the impact of than advertising?
Yeah, and I'd love to hear from the rest of the folks. Look, I'm actually not as up on the way advertising is measured today as others are. So I might not have as up-to-the-minute view. I just know that for 30 or 40 years, advertising had an accepted standard that was extraordinarily weak. Extraordinarily weak. They just agreed on it. GRPs, gross rating points, reach and frequency. What does that get you? For the outcomes experts in this room, GRPs do not get you an outcome measurement. They aren't reaching out and grabbing someone through the television and saying, do you have any intention of buying that product? They're a measurement of outputs. But it was agreed upon. And it was the fundamental basis of billions of dollars of media planning and buying for decades.
Certainly, from my perspective, the marketing directors that I talk to don't claim that PR is any worse at measurement than advertising is. I think there's a danger that we create a problem for ourselves relative to other areas of the Marcoms mix.
Yeah, and it might go back to Arun's question: why are so many agencies fighting this unilaterally when it's hurting our industry so much? And that's exactly what I'll be saying to my friends. They're not enemies. Frenemies. Co-opetition.
You've talked a lot about analytics. You've talked about your geeks that you're identifying in Ketchum. You've talked about training, this sort of shift of focus. You've talked a lot about the big boys, the global agencies. So my question is for the little guys out there, and the little sort of in-house teams. There might be charities with not very much money. So analytics, measurement, all these good things, fantastic, but it's all expensive and it all costs money. But do you think there's things that even the smallest PR agency and smallest in-house team with very tight budgets can still be doing?
Yeah, it's a little bit like content creation. You know, we have 5 or 6 digital video suites in London and in New York, and those used to be big capital expenditures. You know, you'd have to summon the courage to go to the CFO for a big spend. And now the cost is so low, the right of authority is down to the associate director of the office. Yeah, I'll put in another one. Same with online measurement. I mean, frankly, one of the things that we have at Ketchum is we have to kind of rein in the DIY stuff because it's so inexpensive and so, you know, you go to the various Google tools and the various Facebook tools and you can access engagement metrics entirely on your own. So I've always had enormous respect for the small boutique that is kicking the big agency's butt because they are smarter. Now, do they have the breadth, scope, and the concentration of talent that we have? Probably not. But on any given day, a boutique can do a phenomenal job, and a lot of this technology is disintermediating. You don't have to have massive scale or massive capital investment to do it well.
Okay. So no excuses really for anyone.
Yeah.
Thanks. I hear what you're saying about it being democratized through digital media, but the fact remains that only the really big clients have the power, attention, depth, and breadth to take this stuff seriously. And the rump of our industry, certainly in the UK, it isn't, you know, there's the top 20 agencies and then there's absolutely everybody else. How are we going to deal with that moving forward? Is your suggestion that the top agencies band together to create something that is industry recognized, industry standard? You're the guys who are taking the financial hit on that for the benefit of the industry at large? And if so, isn't there a danger that, again, it will be swayed towards those few heavy-hitting multinationals?
Well, good. That's to me a recommendation to not do that. It's to not just first round up all the big boys, because I don't think it's at all relevant just to the big agencies. I was kind of thinking of a bit of a Trojan horse effect where you would get the big ones involved and it would convince everyone else of the wisdom of it. But I think it should be very, across the board. I think of the UK as a place in which the hut boutique is frequently agency of the year. You know, we have a bit more of a tradition in North America where the agency of the year tends to be a big shop, but in the UK, frankly, Ketchum fought for years to be thought of as an agency of the year because we kept losing it to the hut boutiques. And that's a cool environment. So we should enlist them right away because they're thought of as the cool kids.
Thank you. My next question. We ran a column on our site recently from Mark Stoos, who's the CCO at BMC Software. He made the point that when it comes to measurement, it shouldn't be about the PR industry and the measurement industry getting together, coming up with metrics and standards that they all agree on, and then presenting them to clients. He said actually what it should be is the CEO telling its PR agency or its CCO what metrics they want to be measured on. And that's quite a big disconnect, I think, between those two points of view, at least at face value.
Yeah,
what's your response to that?
The CEO of a company telling the CCO.
Telling the CCO or telling the
Right.
PR agency, these are the metrics that matter to us, this is what we want to be measured on. And one of the reasons I ask this question is because I have spoken to a number of CCOs who are quite happy with AVEs because they can exceed them, particularly when you add in the multiplier.
Right. Right.
Yeah, so what's your response to that kind of point of view, given that this is a viewpoint from a senior CCO who obviously has his CEO's ear?
Yeah, well, customer's always right. I would love it if some CEO had a point of view about measuring our discipline. And I would say, great, that's the way we'll do it. It just hasn't happened in 35 years. So, you know, and by the way, a lot of chief communications officers were involved in the development of these uniform standards. So this is market development, not a bunch of agency people getting together. It is the agencies that would be held to the highest standard in measuring this stuff. So we just want to, the first slide I put up was what matters. We want to be in a business that matters. And so whether it's the client telling us this is the way we're going to be measured or us coming up with it, we just have to get there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You talked a bit about, I guess, PR not being isolated in its measurement criteria. But it just seems to me that we're already at the stage where most campaigns, or a lot of campaigns, are collaborative and therefore omni-channel already. So surely there are already a whole bunch of campaigns that have measurement, omni-channel measurement, essentially. So
Yes.
in that sense, that's not a future perspective. That's a now perspective, isn't it?
Yeah, that's why we did an exclusive joint venture with a company called The Modelers, which is a marketing mix modeling expert company, so that we could have our version of a great, earned component to that. I've participated in some multi-agency efforts to create full advertising, promotion, direct marketing, CRM, and PR kind of dashboards. And every time we get invited to that meeting, the advertising-centric gang that put it together is so proud that PR is represented, and PR is always represented as impressions, not even weighted impressions or some algorithm that adds up to something that's qualitative and quantitative. So yeah, we're increasingly doing integrated campaigns. We increasingly are figuring out the best way to plug into that, and I think standards is a really good way to do that. We're working with one of our clients on a Net Promoter Score algorithm because they use Net Promoter Score a lot. So they use it in their,
Across the channels.
yeah,
Yeah.
they use it across the channels, and so we created an algorithm for earned coverage that nets out in 8 or a 9, or, kind of Net Promoter Score, so that they can plug it into all the other ones they're measuring with Net Promoter. Yeah, we love to play along with others. David has a very long tradition of saying to the client, we don't care if you pay us for it. The number one thing we'd love to do is find out if you're already doing it. And if we were to, like brand tracking, and we were to add 3 questions about source of information, you could get a very cost-effective way to get at our role in this. Because if we could do it without you spending a cent, that'd be great. And if we could do it without you spending a cent with us, that would be fine. But just let's do it.
Okay, when we're talking again in say 6 months' time, what are you hoping that you will have achieved, and what are you going to be happy with?
Yeah, how will we know?
Yeah, how will you know? How will you measure it?
Right. I guess I'd want to literally have all those companies signed up and the hot boutiques. Literally
So the 4 other
sign
big
on the
boys,
dotted line.
The 4 other big boys,
Yeah.
hot boutique, globally.
10 or 15 of the biggest marketers, at least the top 5 agencies,
Yeah.
some of the hot boutiques,
Yeah.
and all the associations. Signed up, this is our standard. Then they have to use it.
In 6 months' time, we can
Yeah.
come back and, okay.
I think we're going to hold you to that.
Deal. If I fail, it won't be my biggest problem. It'll be an industry thing.
I just wanted to pick up on something that we've already talked about, but how lovely would it be if you had a CEO who had a very defined view of what they wanted to achieve from their communications. Something that's prevalent in current research in the UK is that in-house communications departments are being downgraded and have been downgraded as a result of the recession. So rather than being strategic input, they're more functionary. If we've got a trend happening where increasingly the communications department is being told what to do by the board, how do we leapfrog that to influence the very top level to understand the importance of communication and to be willing to invest time and money in it from a principal point of view before you get into the intricacies of measuring that outcome?
Yeah. Well, the rise of credibility of the chief communications officer and the communications function is the topic of our next 2-hour conversation. But a lot of it is talent and personality driven. Both the CEO who's receiving this and the CCO who may or may not have the talent and credibility to make the function something that is board worthy. So you have to have all those components, but I get your point. If a company happens to be in a position where that doesn't exist, where that high level of credibility seat at the table doesn't exist, how can you possibly aim for a more strategic way of measuring the function? The two have to go hand in hand.
And you ally that to Unilever, that's made the move away from metrics towards greater inspiration. Arguably that
Toward
does...
measuring...
Well, Unilever have gone on the record as saying that across their marketing they want more inspiration, more instinct.
Yeah.
You know, fewer spreadsheets, more gut. Surely that creates an issue if you are looking to engage with the top 50 multinational, the top 50 marketers across the world, if one of them is going in entirely the opposite direction.
Yeah, I don't know enough about Unilever, but my guess is they aren't going entirely in the opposite direction. They might be doing what the gentleman asked there. Do they overcorrect, go a little bit too far in love with their data, and now they need more of a balance toward inspiration? I have a feeling a company of that size and probably is going to have a lot of metrics around for a long time. And I don't think what we've talked about in terms of a standard for earned media and conversation is an overly rigorous set of data or analytics. To me, it's like down here. It's not blowing the doors off of this and over-complexifying it. So I'll bet you it could easily still find a home at Unilever.
Thank you.
Thanks. We've talked a lot about how the different skill sets are required in this so-called big data era. How do you see the PR industry actually bringing in those skills? Is it a question of hiring different people? Is it retraining, or is it acquisition, or is it partnering with specific companies?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a crisp answer, I guess, but it's all of those, for sure. We have acquired firms in the last couple of years that brought more market intelligence and research capabilities and analytics to our company. As I mentioned, we did a joint venture contract with the modelers to make sure that we were accessing that on a regular basis. We've hired more people with that aptitude, and we're conducting training all the time. So it's all of the above.
Do you feel like there's one of those approaches is going to become more important looking ahead?
Yeah, I think that it's a little bit like an Apple device. When the use of dashboards becomes so intuitive and enjoyable to use, it'll be something that we can all do. And we're getting a lot closer to that. You don't have to roll out the heavy-duty geeks in order to put the dashboard in place and use it. It's becoming, like your iPhone.
Thanks.
Just, do you feel there's a disconnect between, not necessarily Ketchum's clients, because that's an unfair question, but between the corporate comms directors and the agencies in terms of how important the measurement debate is? Because I'm not sure there is, but I wouldn't mind the agency perspective on it.
A disconnect between like chief communications officers on the client side and the agency folks? Yeah, I mean, do I think of it as the highest level conversation going on in our industry? No. Should it be? Probably. And so no, I don't think when those kinds of players get together, I think the paid, earned, shared, and owned dialogue is the highest level discussion right now. The integration of all of those things and the move toward earned is a much more prevalent discussion.
So I guess sort of follow-up question then is, how embedded, or I don't know, maybe I don't know if it's possible to percentage on it, but how embedded is measurement with most corporate comms directors? Do you think they've got a robust process of measuring their PR effort, or do you think for most people it's either work in progress or a bit less than that even?
It's probably roughly one-third, one-third, one-third. One-third are really impressive, really rigorous. One-third are fairly straightforward, and the other third don't care.
I'd say that if you'd have asked that question 2 years ago, the one-third that was really good would have been a lot less than one-third. So yeah. I'd suggest we've made a lot of progress.
That's right, right.
Slightly tongue-in-cheek one, but what's the most random metric you've heard wheeled out by a PR
The most random metric ever
weakest.
wheeled out by a PR firm. There's some floating around in my brain. I see if I can access them because there's some really funny ones. We used to do barstool research for a beer company. It was ethnographic research where you'd collect the data by sitting on a bar stool. That's a lot of fun. That's right. I'll have
Creating buzz. That's quite a good one, isn't it?
Oh, lame ones. Yeah, there's lots of lame
Yeah.
ones. David has a whole slideshow on the lame ones. But yeah, I'll have to give that some thought.
I put you on the spot.
There's a lot of funny ones.
I
I just thought of one. It's really bad. I'm judging one of the big national competitions. And, there's 30 binders. And literally, you open it up to what are your objectives? And there's always a little bit of snobbery about, well, that one clearly isn't good enough. And most of them are not great. You can go through the first 10 binders, and you're just not going to have a winner out of any of them because they're not quantitative or whatever. But literally, on a big brand, the number 2 bullet was pretty up our graphic look. Pretty up our graphic look. They felt that the brand was looking dusty, that there were 1,000 sophisticated ways to say that, but it literally said, pretty up our graphic look. I was like, boom. Yeah, so, yeah.
I just wanted to touch briefly on a point you made in your speech earlier about reskilling. I think that was the euphemism used for firing people.
I didn't say that. Skills rebalancing.
That was it, sorry. That was the euphemism for firing people. I just wondered whether there is a generational aspect to this, whether we, in the same way that we talk about digital natives, if you're talking about people under, the age of 29, whether this comes naturally and normally to them and they find it easier to be both-brained and to balance the use of metrics without stifling their creativity. And I wonder if, for us older folk, there might be the danger that we won't get there by ourselves because it does require too much time, thought, brain space, and effort. Perhaps we need a baby buddy to bring us along and help us to understand how to make the best out of metrics without stifling our ability to think crazily.
Well, it's a decent hypothesis, if only based on the experience we had with social media. We certainly needed, as they called it, reverse mentoring to do that. I don't know. I don't know if you really had the goods on math acumen through the decades. If young people have a greater aptitude than previous generations, I'd have to see, as we would all say in this room, I'd have to see the data on that. I don't have an opinion on that one.
So to change this slightly, I thought it might be interesting. Last night at the cocktail party, I looked at Arun and we were having a conversation. I said, so Arun, how would you feel if we started to ask you guys questions? Normally the press asks us. He said, oh, no, that's not how this deal works. I ask you questions, you don't ask me questions. But I am the chairman of AMEC. This is my conference. So, not my conference, our conference. So, how about some questions for the audience, for the press panel, or for Rob?
Jane Wilson from the CIPR. How much do you feel that it's part of the responsibility of a trade media to represent and champion the best of the industry and to take these standards forward?
I seem to have the mic. I think, clearly, in a way, of course, as the trade media, I think it's something that we're interested in, or PR Moment anyway, we're interested in, and we champion. It's interesting, and it's not quite what you asked, but we do a lot of editorial on this issue. And to put it politely, they're not the most well-read features. So, frankly, we've covered it a lot, but it's kind of been a selfless act. If I want to drive up my viewing figures, guess what? I don't do a feature on measurement. But having said that, But it's 200 views. But having said that, we do have an analytics conference. Well, yeah, wrong metric. Having said that, we do have an analytics conference which sells out. So I'm not sure it's quite as simple as that. But yeah, I think so. I mean, I go back a lot to the buyer has to drive this, and I think it's great that AMEC does this work. I think I think all of us actually do good work trying to promote the measurement or move the measurement debate forward. But in the end, I think it comes down to the buyer of PR. And those are the guys. We can all try our hardest, but the corporate comms directors have the key seat in the whole of this debate. And if they decide that they're going to move, and they are, not en masse, but quite a few, and it's getting better and the processes are becoming more robust, then I think we'll reach a place where we want to get to.
Just to add to that, which I think is a really good kind of summary. We've always kind of viewed our role as to try and improve the value of public relations. And so yes, of course, that means in certain cases championing things. It also means questioning them at times, because if you don't, then things don't improve necessarily. But I'll admit that after covering this industry now for a long time, over a decade, the issue of measurement can get a little bit fatiguing. Because it seems like we have the same conversation every year. I will say that over the last couple of years, it does feel like there's more progress being made.
That, by the way, is one reason why I'd like to see us aim for this goal. Because I've been doing this for a long time, too. And at some point, we got to get it behind us and move on.
Unlike Arun, I haven't spent the last 10 years covering PR because I was busy being in it. And it used to frustrate the hell out of me that every single board meeting that I attended as in-house global communications director, my time with the board was justifying the existence of me and my department. I was a bottom line cost, I was non-billable, I was a cost of the business, and I had to prove what value I brought to it when we won a new account. That clearly was done by the new business director and had nothing to do with the marketing and communications team opening doors. So from a purely personal point of view, I'm very passionate about measurement because it would, if I had a reasonable metric that I could show as an industry standard that proved return on investment, it would have made my life as an in-house director so much easier. I would have wasted so much less time on trying to prove the worth of what I was doing because I could just get on with doing it. So from transferring that to PR Week, it is something that I've set out as part of my my editorship and one of the campaigns that I'm passionate about. Not because I love formulas, I don't, but because I think measurement is inherently tied to showing the genuine value that communications brings as a business discipline. I'll stop ranting now.
From the Gulkana point of view, incredibly important to support this. I'm a former PR as well, so it's something that is a subject close to my heart. I'm a little bit of a measurement geek as well, as Richard Bagnall will tell you. But when I go to meetings and I talk about, have you heard about the Barcelona principles? I can't tell you the number of times that people have looked at me like, what the hell is she talking about? So, and like Ben, we see our figures instantly, so we know what sort of content people are really devouring, and unfortunately, it is never the measurement side of things, but I've made the commitment that we're still going to, cover it a certain number of times a year because it's incredibly important. Someone has to do it, and you need to be out there talking about it. And David's been incredibly helpful over the years, giving me lots of great interviews. So,
that apparently aren't read, but that's okay. That's all right.
You know what, though?
The important people read them.
So far today, she's called me Robin, because I'm pretty sure he was talking about him as Batman. She's disagreed with something I said, and you told me my stuff's not right. Okay, go ahead. Just keep going, Celine. It's great.
Well, can I just say that I would ask the journalists here represent all the big brands, if you think there's something interesting there, to look at the new analytics that are surrounding our business or are above our business and write about that as through the lens that I've been trying to convey it, which is let's get our act together so that we can play with the big boys, or we're going to get creamed. We're really going to be left behind. And so to the degree that you could cover, not the ongoing incrementalism of this dialogue, but the looming threat and opportunity, I think that would put some new juice behind it. And as I say, when I walked the PRSA vendor corridor, it was unbelievable, really cool stuff. It was like, wow, this is the hottest stuff in the industry.
Let's take one more from the audience, and that'll end us right on time. And Marion, I saw your hand go up first. Sorry, Chris.
Thank you. Marion McDonald from Ogilvy, Asia Pacific in Hong Kong. My left brain and my right brain are in a bit of turmoil in this conference. There's a geeky part of me that loves measurement, but I know that going back into the agency next week, the big challenge that we have is also creativity. How can we find new ways to fire up creativity in PR, which I believe is where Unilever is going and what they mean by cutting back on the too much measurement and not enough great, bold, creative ideas fueling PR. I would like to get each of your point of view on how you would advise us as measurement experts how we can refocus our discussion around measurement that also helps to fuel creativity for our clients, both as PR professionals and agency people in the room.
Well, that's interesting. I'll answer that in two parts, if I may. The first one, a direct answer to your question. I would very simply focus on measuring the behavior outcomes, because it seems to me if you focus upon that rather than the numbers, that leads your mindset to being more creative. And I think that's kind of how I would deal with that. The other thing on PR, I don't know, it's probably not the point for the debate, or the time for the debate, I should say, but PR's about lots and lots of different things. There are lots of disciplines in PR. I've always been pretty skeptical when people try and value PR purely on creativity. PR's about relationships, timing, luck, being able to produce great content. And creativity has a role in that. But I'm always a bit uncomfortable when people purely try and judge great PR just on creativity, which is not to downplay creativity, but I just think it's worth thinking about creativity as part of a tool set within public relations.
So Marion, we did a study last year on creativity in PR, and actually it was the most, the biggest in the sense that we got the most responses we ever got for any survey. And I think the biggest finding I took away from that is that the PR industry has tended to look at creativity in terms of content. So what is the lovely video? What is the great, amazing event? The beautiful picture that we can develop? And actually, I think it's more about culture and the culture of the business. I used to cover the advertising industry. And creativity, as you know, I think working at Ogilvy, creativity is something that people talk about every day within the advertising industry. And this is not to say that the PR industry should necessarily emulate the advertising industry, and certainly should not emulate the egos of the creative directors within the advertising industry. But I do feel that some of that culture would be very helpful in the PR industry. I can go months, frankly, or at least I used to go months before we did this study, where no one would even mention creativity in the PR industry. And I think it's about culture. It's about having the right people and doing certain things that encourage creativity. When we asked people what was the number one thing they did to generate creative ideas, it was group brainstorming. That was like 65% of the people, and I would suggest that's really not going to help.
How can measurement help them?
That's a good question. I'll let maybe someone else in the panel answer that one.
Over to someone else, right.
Yeah, thanks for that question. You know we're going to get you later, don't you? I take a slightly different point of view. I don't think you can underestimate the value of creativity. It's what makes the industry special. Personally, I'm never going to get over dancing giant pandas in Trafalgar Square. That wasn't something that came out of tick lists and SWOT analyses. That is pure from the heart, from the gut, and you can never tell when those things are going to come. What you can do is motivate people by showing them how much they change behaviour, how great an impact they have on their client's business, and that's where measurement comes in. It's not showing them the detail of the thing and swamping them in detail that's going to make them run for the hills screaming. It is showing them how it proves to them their value, their worth, and the importance of their creative input it's grounding creativity in real terms that shows how they're delivering for themselves, their businesses, and their clients.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was going to say usually you've got all these creative people, but you've always got to have that one person that brings it back down to earth and says, well, actually, how are we going to link this with, the outcomes? So it's really just about, I think it was looking at the right people, the right mix of people. But I will say as well, I think everyone can be creative, but it's just, everyone's got creativity inside of them, even if they don't think they're a creative person, but it's just getting the right sort of motivation to unlock that and to tap into it. And I think the big idea probably makes up, 95% of what you do, but then you've still got to be allowing at least 5% or so for the measurement. You can't just ignore it.
So just to add on, I thought, Ruth made a really good point there about the value of business results. And, if you go to advertising shows, for example, when they judge creative work, there's actually no results element to it. So the idea that we should be looking at creativity in isolation of results, I think it's pointless. And it does strike me as being the best way of encouraging creativity is being able to demonstrate that it worked.
Okay, and to close out, a final comment from Rob?
I would just say that I totally agree with that maybe I started with what matters. Maybe we should end with creativity that matters, that's what we should be aiming toward. Great creativity that is measured so that we can really show the effectiveness of it. I say to our folks at Ketchum that a great day at our firm is when the client team comes back and they say, you won't believe it, we presented our big idea and they said, we need all the other disciplines to line up behind it. The ad agency, the promotional agency, the digital agency, they're all going to line up behind our idea. And that happens occasionally. I'd like to see the day when, from the PR firm, it happens very frequently. The only way we're going to get there is dramatically ramp up risk-taking creativity, but also measure it and show time after time after time that this was a more efficient way to get to your target customer, that their behavior did change. The two absolutely have to go hand in hand. And in the spirit of kind of cross-industry collaboration, the best creative I've seen in the past week was from Ogilvy, France, for IBM. And if you Google IBM urban furniture, you'll see this amazing experiential campaign in which they turned their fairly ubiquitous bus posters that are in airports and bus stations and everything into things you could sit on or protected you from the rain. It's just a great out-of-the-box idea. So kudos to Ogilvy for that great work. And thank you all so much for joining and listening. David?
Thank you.